Happy Friday, everyone. I am Jen Lee, aka Rebel Esquire, and welcome to the Rebel Roundtable this Friday. I am super excited to have Lueddemann here, who I've known for, I feel like ever and ever, since I was a baby lawyer. But Lee is an IP attorney and he does patents, trademarks, copyrights, tons of experience in the legal world in general, in different states, federal, data privacy attorney, all the things. And so I get to pick his brain today about AI, robots, all the things that are happening these days that are moving very quickly with information that belongs to others, technically speaking. So, Lee, thanks for being here.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you for letting me join you.
So, give us a little bit of your background, like where all the places you've been and how you got to an IP attorney and what you're doing now.
Ah, so background. I started, well, initially I didn't want to be an attorney. I wanted to be a doctor. So I started my undergraduate in biophysics pre-med, decided if I wasn't going to be a doctor, I'll be a lawyer. Ended up going to graduate school um, for molecular biology and biochemistry. And 1 year into that graduate program, I started law school at a different university. And so I don't know if it was my best moment ever or not, but I did those two programs simultaneously, driving back and forth between both campuses. So from an early on standpoint, I learned to balance science, technology, and law.
Very cool.
Regarding professional, without taking too long, I've kind of run the gamut. I have been a state prosecutor for the state of Florida. I was an attorney for the federal government. I was general counsel for a publicly traded pharmaceutical company, which is where I started my data privacy journey in the year of 2000. So I've been doing it for 25 years.
Wow.
Taught law school in privacy, large firm, small firm, nonprofit, and now I'm solo enough counsel at a couple firms.
Very cool. Lots of good background. And one of the only people I know that likes going to school more than I do, apparently. I didn't like going to school. I just liked all the information and learning as much as I could about a whole bunch of different things. So,
And
all
at the
kinds of.
moment, as you said, my current practice, I'm a registered patent attorney. So I do patents, trademarks, copyrights, prosecution. I haven't litigated in a long time, and I won't do that now. Uh, I have been doing data privacy now for 25 years. Like I said, used to teach it in law school. I deal a lot with domestic and international data privacy, which, speaking about robots, between data in, data out, data privacy, and intellectual property, puts me into the camp of artificial intelligence and the AI related law. And that's my whole
Yes.
practice.
And that's where I want to lead us down that path here because you said something one day that sparked my interest, which is always dangerous. You never know exactly where that's going to go. But you were talking about the idea of creative and novel information in the legal world and how that relates to all of these new things that are happening with AI, automation, our robot overlords. But for those of us who aren't IP attorneys, what does creative and novel information really mean?
So, if we're talking about patents, those are some of the buzzwords for what it takes to get a patent.
Okay.
It has to be novel. Well, the whole point of a patent is to, instead of keeping a really good, new, novel, useful idea secret, you share it with the public. And in sharing it with the public, the government grants you a 20-year monopoly as a reward. And so it's a teaching tool for the public, very fundamentally. It also, and one thing that you don't hear very often, that you hear common, it's also meant to encourage competition for people to learn and design around the patented invention. So it shouldn't be a surprise when Dyson came up with that new vacuum cleaner and suddenly all vacuum cleaners look like the Dyson did 15, 20 years ago, right?
Yep.
That's what the patent system is designed. So you have useful, non-obvious, those types of things, an idea getting out there. Now, with artificial intelligence and data privacy, it's still information, but not just a system or a thing you can hold.
Mhm.
But we're pushing more where these new systems and vast amounts of information can be put together and basically amalgamated in a matter of seconds, if not faster, especially with edge computing. So it's just pushing the boundaries of these areas I've been practicing in law closer and closer together and starting to blur the lines, which I think is fantastic going into uncharted territory.
It's fun. And that's why you and I get along so well because we like to do things that haven't been done before and push those lines. Something that's come up a lot recently, and I don't know if you can actually answer this question. This is why these live streams are so fun to do because I get to just throw things out there. When, like, say, Chat GPT or AI, because I hate the fact that everyone uses AI and they all think this is just Chat GPT is the only thing that's AI. But when AI creates something like art or music or code, what's right now going on with who actually owns it? Is it the programmer, the AI, no one who owns it right now?
And I like that word own because I'm going to split it into two. I'm
Okay,
going to say own it as in intellectual property and copyrights. And then I'm also going to own it in terms of who owns the liability when something goes sideways,
good distinction.
which is something we haven't heard of a lot recently, but I think we will as time goes on, probably within the next few years.
Mhm.
First, copyright issues, because that's what we've been hearing about for a long time, especially. And the Copyright Clearance Center puts out a lot of great articles and discussions regarding AI use and copyright. So if anybody's interested, search up the Copyright Clearance Center and see what they put out there in their blogs and articles and chats and stuff. What really anything with especially patents and copyrights creating something new, you need a human to do it. A dog can't do it, a gorilla can't do it, and a robot can't do it. Needs to be a human.
Mhm.
And so the interesting case in China, this is a few years back now, but they saw an AI created image in terms of copyright infringement. Even though AI created the image, it was the human input that made it copyrightable and therefore copyright infringement. And so all these long prompts were like writing a piece of literature in effect.
Yeah.
Same way that, and if you're anybody's interested in there and nerding out with me in my little world, you can go back and when photography was new, this is a Supreme Court case, and I don't know the name of it either. Clearly, none of these questions were given to me beforehand, so I couldn't
No, of
prepare.
course not. Why would I want to do that? That wouldn't be any fun at all to have a live stream where you can prepare for
And
it.
now you get a view into my brain as to how I think. Here. So there was, when photography was not new, but new-ish, maybe 100 years ago, there was the Supreme Court case where they debated as to whether a photograph could be copyrighted or not, because again, that was created by a machine.
Yeah.
And what they saw was, and if you read the Supreme Court case, basically, even though it was created by a machine, not a human, the human had a lot of input, focus, flash, background, and those things put into their human work and therefore made it copyrightable. So that's what we're looking at, and probably in patents too, how much human input was there, not just machine. And that's kind of the high level view of what we're looking at is to human versus machine and the mixture of the two creating something cool. Or, to put it more into legal speak, novel, useful, etc., talking professionally. Now then liability, which I think is interesting, and it's something I need to explore a little bit more just to be prepared because I can see this coming.
Hmm.
There's such a thing for the non-lawyers out there called burden of proof. And I
Okay.
know when you watch cop shows, you hear, can you find them guilty of murder beyond a reasonable doubt, which pretty much means beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
Sometimes preponderance of the evidence, which means more than 50% they're likely to have done it, depends on the crime or the civil tort,
Hmm.
civil penalty, as depending on how much the person has to prove to make that person guilty or liable. And that goes into intellectual property too. For example, what's the burden of proof on a copyright for copyright infringement? For trademark infringement, for patent infringement, which I find interesting, it can be, not always, but it can be strict liability.
Really?
Strict liability means no intent. You did
Right.
it. The end. You didn't, even if you didn't know it existed. For example, let's put that into AI. A patent can be in other areas, but let's focus on patents because that's strict liability. This makes it interesting. Um, a patent can be a thing, or it can be a combination of things or ideas. You can patent that combination. If you search up, if somebody searches up something on AI and ends up putting together a combination of ideas, even
Hmm.
if those things weren't directly infringing those each idea by themselves, the combination does infringe on a patent, they could potentially be liable for patent infringement without even knowing those patents are out there. So
Interesting.
can't
Hmm.
hold, I thought so too. Can't hold AI liable. It's a robot, right? But you can hold that person liable in strict liability, I think. I have not heard of a single case out there, but these are the novel areas we're going to hear as AI continues and more people use it and it gets more powerful and people get better at using it and creating great things with it. I think it's just going to open up a world that gets very interesting.
Well, and I think that's, again, one thing I appreciate about you is that you can create new practice areas. New practice areas are being invented all the time, and everyone thinks the traditional legal practice areas, but we have virtual reality law, AI, like all of these things that are being created are going to create new areas of opportunity for lawyers to be looking at. And so I just want to encourage people to think outside the box and what kinds of legal issues could come up with these things that are happening right now.
Jen, you and I are of the same mind. I think that even plays into, and something I get asked frequently is how many jobs is AI going to make irrelevant, make
Yeah.
old?
Yeah.
And I see it as the same as any technology or industrial revolution. Some jobs go away, and there are other ones that are created. And
Yep.
I encourage everybody to stay on top of it and look for those avenues because we've all seen instances where complacency leads to irrelevance.
Yep.
And
Doing
people
things
that
the way they've
work
always been
hard
done.
and stay ahead of the wave are the ones that are successful.
And I also argue that AI automates things that are routine and predictable and things that a human doesn't need to do. And humans should be doing the things that humans need to do. And so it opens up time for you to work on those things that you should be working on, whoever you are. It doesn't have to be lawyers, it could be anyone working. We all have a list of like 10,000 things to do. And if we could get rid of some of the repetitive stuff that needs to be done, it opens up creativity and time to work on other things. So just thinking outside the box. Um,
It's we haven't gotten rid of human in the loop yet. That's I'm sure everybody's heard that now, but for those of you who haven't, that means AI by itself can be inaccurate, or we've all heard it hallucinates and lies, and so you still need a human in the loop there, working with AI collaboratively, as
yeah.
I like to think of it, to make sure your analyses and data outputs are accurate.
Yeah. And I also, it was interesting that you brought up that photography case from like 100 years ago because everyone's thinking, well, our current laws don't deal with this. And I'm like, but they kind of do if you adapt like precedent and play it forward. So I really liked your example of the photography because a machine created this. That's exactly what they say today is a machine created this. But what actually went into it was the prompting. And I find that's where I love some of the, the large language models and that kind of thing, because my creativity is what creates really cool stuff coming out of it. But it couldn't have done it without all the things I put into it. And so I kind of like that part of things. So
I am pretty sure I just looked it up while you were talking.
yeah.
Burl Giles lithographic company versus Sarney from Supreme Court, 1884.
1884, huh?
I think that's the case. I'd have to go through it. It's been
That's
at
fine.
least
Yeah.
a year
This
since I've
isn't
looked
a
at it.
this isn't a silly. I don't. whenever I'm doing it, I'm like, there's a case for this. I know there is. I'm gonna have to go look it up. I probably will have to ask Chat GPT later to figure out half the things I and check it, of course, because sometimes it makes up cases. Um, so let's talk about like future here. What do you think, or what do you see happening in the next 5 years or so with IP law and AI and robots?
I think that people are going to figure out, and maybe AI too, if it's trained up right, to come up with the answer to make it more and more accurate in terms of responses. I think the novelty and the shine will eventually wear off, and people will incorporate it more and more as we have the internet over the past 30 years, and it'll just become, if it hasn't already, integral into our daily lives.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of new technologies,
Can you even, that's the thing, it's hard to imagine sometimes the things they're going to come up with. So, yeah.
yeah, it just, I don't know, digital clone or digital persona law. I mean, who knows where it's going to go? And by that, I mean, we may have an avatar and a digital persona and
Yeah.
things that represent us digitally. Does that person, our digital person, have rights similar to our real person? And that's not new, but I haven't seen cases on that either. And it's more than just, Sims in, that, I don't know, whatever that world was where they had Sims and
Yeah.
virtual
Like Sin
reality.
City or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more than that, because now it's going to be more and more relevant. So things like that we may see. And I don't know where that's going to go, or even if that's going to be a thing.
Well, if you can find a robot that will actually answer my emails correctly without me being involved, that would be great. I know there's some out there. I've played with a few different, AI things that draft emails and stuff for you. And I find I'm too sarcastic for AI to understand me sometimes. So, um, but there's all kinds of cool tools out there. And I think some of us get stuck in that shiny object syndrome where like you're playing with lots of things and have to tamper back a little bit. Um, what, speaking of, there was a thing that came up recently around books. Someone was using a chat or something to, or Claude, whatever, to help them write a book. I would argue that it's the inputs that they're creating the book, they're editing and doing all of that. I know there's some authors that are suing. I think I'm not, this isn't my area because chat writes in Stephen King style or whatever. What's going on in that area when it comes to like authoring and publishing? Do you know?
So it's more complicated than first blush in terms of looking at copyrights and books. And again, Copyright Clearance Center has some great articles on it. But basically, when I first heard this too, before I looked into it a little more, I thought, people have been sampling songs on the radio with increasing, and nobody was complaining about that unless it was almost the whole song. And I thought, what's the problem? We read a book, we get an idea, like the storyline of Cinderella, right? Rags to riches, we've seen that
Right.
over and over again. Besides Disney, Pretty Woman, those things, I thought, well, that's just natural. Well, here's where it gets interesting is it's understanding basically, and I promise I won't get, I'll try not to bore you, Jen. AI works is it's not just, it doesn't read like us, right? It's still a robot and a computer and algorithms and things. So it will scan language, translate it into something digital, right? And in that step, remember, it has to hold on to the language it wrote in order to translate it into something digital. So therein you have a copy of it saved. There's the problem. And then it translates it into something digital. It can then use it, break it apart, do whatever it's going to do with it. But it's that saving of a copy potentially without the author's permission or the copyright owner's permission,
Mm,
even if it's just briefly, that people are saying it gets into trouble.
right.
Uh, and that is maybe why it can help write a book, which well, I haven't looked at this issue. I don't see it
Yeah.
potentially being a problem just helping you author something, like a photo, like a camera helping you
Yeah.
capture a moment that you frame and stuff. but just the way it works, if it's using copyrighted material, even if the author doesn't, even if the user doesn't know it, it might be using some of the original author's material
Mhm.
saved without permission. And that's kind of where it could be a problem. I see there's probably other ones as well.
Yeah.
Eventually we may see, and I've heard of a potential solution being like ASCAP or some of these other. And for those of you who aren't familiar with ASCAP, there are, oh boy, I'm reaching back. But when you go into a restaurant and you see a little boombox or stereo playing music, right? They don't need a license for that, as far as I know. This, I'm getting a little out of my field.
Yeah.
But if you do use songs without the artist's permission, that could be a problem. And so you get a license through a
Mhm.
organization like ASCAP, and you buy a license, and then you have license to use those songs more than just a boombox in the corner
Right.
professionally. And so that's buying a license to use that copyrighted material. We might see something like that in terms of published materials, books, periodicals, etc., like that. And people are looking for responses because it does need to hold on to that copy.
Right.
And so it's not just a matter of identifying the problem, but also looking for a solution so we can continue on.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think as you were talking there, it kind of reminded me of back in like early internet days when you would get like a full copy of a book scanned in online, and then all of a sudden, like people are emailing around copies of books and stuff like that. That's kind of what it reminded me of early days of dealing with digital rights and that kind of thing. So,
Agreed. And I think back too with early emails, I just thought of this like last month, I think. When email first came out, one of the rules was don't ever put anything in email in your company email you wouldn't post on the break room bulletin board, right?
right.
And
Yep.
I kind of see that carrying over into the same idea in at least public AIs.
Yep. Well, I mean, there was the where Chat GPT recently had where if you shared a link with someone, it got put out there as a public link. Um, and I tend to agree with that. I wouldn't put anything into a open something that's not captive on my server or my thing that I wouldn't want others to ever read, or private information that I wouldn't want out there, I guess. So I think some of that safety, and that also makes lawyers very cautious because a lot of them tend to be very risk averse. And I think they're going to miss the boat going back to the earlier parts of our discussion here on forward thinking and how to use the technology versus let's just say no to all of it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And we were, I think, the last group of professionals that I know of that held on to Word Perfect. And so we can be collectively resistant to change. So that's
I
something
just
else
got like
to keep in,
hills and shivers and
something to keep in mind too. I know we have that history.
I still know lawyers who use WordPerfect, by the way.
Ah, well, there you go. I shouldn't speak in past tense.
No, and I'm going to drag them kicking and screaming 50 years in the future. But yes, going off on my tangents about lawyers and law firms not understanding why no one wants to work there. Um, so we had talked about robots earlier. Talk a little bit about like what you mean when you say robots, when you because I think we have the same vision of robots, like agentic type things, basically, but robots.
Yeah, and I use the term loosely. I think part of
Yeah,
it is as well,
tongue in
as a
cheek a little
small
bit.
child, I had a robot collection. I used to go to a special store and they had robots imported from Japan, and I couldn't read any of the directions, but it has a place in my heart. I think it always will. So
Yeah,
back to 6 or 7 year old Lee,
yeah.
I still think robots. And so when I say robots and I call AI a robot, I say so affectionately because I still think they're cool.
They are cool, but I think there's a lot of like I'm running across all of these um, programmers and automation people these days that are leaning into the robot, creating almost like agents that do things digitally. And I think that's kind of a cool. way that things have gone. So we don't have the Jetsons with the robot running around things, but now we're having them in our computers doing some of the things that hopefully they're doing correctly. But I'm running across robots a lot these days in the terms of AI and digital manipulation of data. So it's interesting. It's always fun to read. Um, what So for lawyers who aren't IP attorneys and for non-lawyers, because I may have one or two of those watching, what would you give advice to like small firms, creatives to stay ahead in protecting ideas when it comes to all of these new things out there?
So, protecting ideas goes into the realm of IP, and that
Okay.
hasn't changed much. It's still identifying issue for the lawyers out there, issue spotting, right? Is this potentially patentable, not just for them, but their clients as well? We're all supposed to be good issue spotters, and the better issue spotters, the better we can serve our clients by if we can't help them funneling them to a person who can or who knows somebody who can. And that's just good client service. And that goes for intellectual property, as well. So you have patents, trademarks, copyrights, those things. It's I see it as a risk analysis. Some clients can probably afford to protect everything under the sun, and money's not an issue. But for those that it is, what's the vulnerability?
Mm-hmm.
What's the threat? And therein you have your risk. I see it as a matricy. And I used to explain it in my privacy class as telling the story of the big bad wolf and the three little pigs, because I think that's a great example of a risk analysis with threat versus vulnerability. Of course, the big bad wolf being the threat and the vulnerability being straw, sticks, or bricks.
Yep.
Um, and so with that and these new technologies, I think that a good way to, I really encourage everyone to become familiar with it.
Yeah.
Um, in fact, part of my presentations, especially around AI, is do something easy with it. For
Mm-hmm.
example, and I'm giving a presentation on AI in front of a bunch of lawyers and other professionals who it's an introduction into AI for people who are kind of afraid to use it and haven't embraced it
Yeah.
yet. I promise to do something in this meeting and maybe for your listeners to encourage your listeners as well or viewers if you haven't tried it, I have not, but I have heard that it's really cool. And Jen, actually, maybe you can try it and you can give me some insight to hold up your phone with chat or whatever else and show it the fridge and say, give me some recipes of what I currently have in here. And I
Mm-hmm.
promised I would do that to see if it works. I've heard it works. I think it'd be fantastic. But if it's something as easy and friendly like that, I don't see that as a big breach of data.
Right.
But learn what's a good recipe for, I don't know, chicken parmesan. What do I put into breadcrumbs? What should I make out of this? Food, or what's wrong with my roses? They have this powdery mildew, I think. How do I cure it?
Yep.
Things like that you can use on your daily life. Just download it and start familiarizing yourself with it. And for attorneys, remember, now we're looking at redaction and things like that that we don't want leaked out. Remember, put on the break room bulletin board.
Mm-hmm.
But this might be publicly searchable results potentially to make sure, but just familiarize yourself with it. Great ideas will come to you, especially if you do it with caution. And
Right.
remember, you're a lawyer and you have to protect the data. But I think that's the really big first step. And I know you've always, so long as I've known you, Jen, I don't know how many decades, you've always been an innovator. And so I know for you, I don't need to tell you any of this. You could probably school me on it.
No, I
But
know, but I also what I see is a lot of lawyers that I work with in organizations that aren't protecting anything, and they don't even. I don't know if they don't think of it or they think, oh, that's not how it's been done, because that's usually the line I get is that's not how we've always done things. But I also think that if there are business formation attorneys out there or their practice is like a general counsel to businesses, they need to at least have basic legal issue spotting for IP issues and partner with an IP attorney if they're not one themselves. And I see a lot of that when people are starting up companies that they don't look at the IP side of it. And I really want them to. So with all the changes
I
that are happening.
I agree. One of the easiest examples is trademark law. And if a client has a great product or service with their company name, it's possible in trademark law, it's a race to the office. Whoever
Yep.
files first is the winner. And I have seen on multiple occasions a client is introduced to me and I tell them, you might want to file this name before somebody yanks it out from under you.
Yep.
And that's why, yeah, just realizing simple things like that when you're saying IP. And now with privacy law and AI laws and things like that, it's increasingly more. For example, um, any website that has you can create an account on, so a login and then a password. When you put those two things together, you are suddenly have special information or
Mhm.
privacy, personal information through the California CCPA, and
Yep.
that gets special attention and special disclosure. And I think probably, oh gosh, I don't know what percentage of websites have accounts with logins. But if you save those two
Many, because I got
together,
too many passwords.
yes,
Yes.
you need a password and an account. And
Yep.
there's rules and stuff, and I'm not saying you can't do it,
Right.
but people
Just
just
follow
need
the
to
rules.
be aware now of privacy laws as well, because I see a lot of attorneys that will search up a privacy notice, slap it on a website, and it's not always accurate. And it
Yep.
doesn't have all the back end backup on it. And that could be a problem for attorneys as well, which is another
Yes.
reason to refer out. We all have our special areas. I refer out things that I don't know about, and I encourage everybody else to do that in privacy and intellectual property as well.
Yeah. Good advice. So, Lee, as we try to wrap this up, because I could probably go on all day about AI and robots and IP, where can people find you at?
So
Online, email? Where can they
that's
find you?
probably the easiest. Search me up through my solo practice law office of Leopold Lueddemann and teaser. I will also have an online website going for this new techie area that we've been talking about called Intellicy, Intellacy,
Cool.
the combination of words intellectual property and privacy,
Yeah.
Intellicy. So I will have that intellicylaw.com up too, so you can find me on ludemannlaw.com or intellicylaw.com.
Very cool. And I will put those in the show notes as soon as we're done here, and also link to the other resources that you mentioned. So thank you for being here. We do have a wrap up question that I always have to ask everyone. And when you do your appearance, it asks what your Rebel anthem is, because we have a Spotify playlist of all our Rebel anthems that are out there. Do you remember what you put on there? Or what is your favorite song to get pumped up to these days when you want to be a rebel?
Oh my gosh, I don't remember, but it would have to be Bach.
Yep, it was
Uh,
Bach.
it was, yes, my favorite artist of all time. And my kids make fun of me. I have a Ford F-150 truck, and I love playing harpsichord and organ and violin music, which they say doesn't work. And invariably, it's Bach.
That's funny. So yeah, you had Toccata and Fugue in D minor as the
Right.
so I will add that to the Spotify playlist, which I actually love because I like all kinds of music, and it's really fun when you listen to my playlist and you go from like Rebel and David Bowie down to Bach. Um all kinds of fun stuff. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Great information. And everyone else, I will see you on the Rebel Roundtable in a couple of weeks, because next week I am taking a break. So Friday mornings, 9 a.m. Pacific. See you all later. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.